show tomorrow unless we can come up with some more money.
Aw, and I wanted tomorrow's episode to be in CG! Aww. Sorry, CJ Patrick!
In October 2018, Norbit director Brian Robbins was tapped to be the president of Nickelodeon. In one of his first days holding the position, he attended a pickup meeting for season 13 of SpongeBob SquarePants. Noticing that the show had remained the same for 20 years, he sat down with the creative team and encouraged them to brainstorm ways to explore the history of the characters and place them into their own environments, leading to what would be known as the SpongeBob universe, a collection of spin-offs that have weaved in and out of the main series in an attempt to create Nickelodeon's equivalent of the MCU. Camp Koral, SpongeBob's Underyears, is about the main cast attending a sleepaway summer camp as children. The Patrick Star Show has the sidekick host an imaginary variety show while living with his family. The Tidal Zone is a non-canon horror-themed crossover anthology special. And Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie, sends the squirrel to live-action Texas, where she reunites with her family and rescues her stolen hometown. We've gotten 2 seasons and roughly 40 episodes of both series as the franchise celebrates its 25th anniversary. So, with light spoilers ahead, I thought this would be a great opportunity to check in on how SpongeBob has evolved from being defined by a single cartoon with a limited number of characters and settings to an interconnected collection of projects spanning across 2 streaming platforms and 1 TV channel.
You can't keep me out of your house! I'm on basic cable!
Within 1 month of the first spin-offs being put into development on November 26, 2018, creator Steven Hillenburg passed away after being diagnosed with ALS a year prior. By July, his speech and motor function had been impaired, and while he stopped coming into office around the end of August, he was still involved with the day-to-day operations of the show, and attended every episode mix session until his passing. Current showrunner Vince Willar confirmed he was aware of Camp Coral's development, a statement corroborated by the cast in regards to unsureness about the show's animation. But both of these quotes were released only weeks before it was set to premiere. This spin-off was officially announced in June 2019 and met with backlash from both fans and former showrunner Paul Tibbitt, who accused the network of going against Hillenburg's wishes by recalling quotes about how Steve didn't see any spin-offs and joked about how one of these days they're gonna want to make SpongeBob babies. That's when I'm out of here.
Now SpongeBob's a baby?
It's worth noting that these 2 quotes came from an old 2009 interview and someone who stopped working on the franchise years prior. But there's no definitive source on whether or not this was something Hillenburg approved of, just that he knew about it. However, this is the same creator who originally said no to a movie and sequels to that movie, yet he changed his mind and went on to be involved with them anyway. The team behind all the spin-offs we'll cover today is the same one Steve entrusted with making the series in his final years. I know this debacle has been long since debunked, but I still see people making the same criticisms that they were 5 years ago, and I wanted to set the record straight. Especially since Vincent Waller's Twitter, a major source of research on this topic, was recently deleted. Right when I started editing this video too, the timing couldn't be better. Whether you felt it shouldn't exist or wanted to give it a chance, tensions were high within the fandom when the SpongeBob universe launched in March 2021, although it didn't necessarily start with Camp Koral. In a story conceived by Steven Hillenburg alongside director Tim Hill, the film depicts Camp Koral, here spelled with 2 C's, as the setting where SpongeBob first met Gary, Sandy, Patrick, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs as a kid. While the idea to turn these sequences into their own cartoon came later, the way these flashbacks interrupt the 3rd act come across as the movie stopping to include a big advertisement, not helped by both being simultaneously released in the United States, with the hope that viewers would immediately jump from one into another.
It's all streaming March 4th, only on Paramount+.
Sponge on the Run retroactively feels like some kind of legacy sequel meant to pass the torch over to Camp Koral. Maybe I'm saying that because this is to the first SpongeBob movie what The Force Awakens is to A New Hope, rehashing and remixing plot beats and story devices, only with the same characters and without a motivation to reintroduce this world to a new generation. Just replace King Neptune with King Poseidon and Scarlett Johansson with Keanu Reeves.
But dealing with you 2 makes me want to light myself on fire.
Years after I first covered it, the pacing is wonky, some of the dialogue and slang is forced, the cameos are unintentionally funny, and the licensed songs are almost as generic as the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Also, I can't get over how they not only used Livin' La Vida Loca, but also lifted the side character rescue subplot directly from Shrek 2, right down to being alerted by a TV broadcast. This thing is 100% carried by what is hands down the best CG rendition of Bikini Bottom, and the voice actors delivering some of their finest performances.
My heart, buddy.
I still don't get the hate over how previous lore concerning how the cast met is retconned, because SpongeBob never had a consistent canon. To quote Vincent Waller and co-showrunner Mark Ceccarelli,
"We don't really respect canon just for the sake of itself. We see it like a jar sitting up on a shelf in a corner with a label that says canon on it, and we recognize that, but we also treat every episode like a standalone that can go anywhere in the universe."
The policy is all well and good when you're making a show in isolation, but the appeal of this expanded universe is to follow the characters that cross over between each show. Why should I care about what happens to them within this franchise if it might not matter? It's a valid concern, but unless you're a YouTuber or a wiki editor trying to keep track of lore, is consistency the only thing you're watching SpongeBob for? The crew made a whole episode showing how miserable it is to consume TV like this, and I know from experience that they're completely right.
There, the baseball clearly enters frame right to left, whereas previously it was traveling left to right. The shots don't hook up. My immersion is ruined!
Some contradictions can be a little distracting, no doubt about that, but their goal here is ultimately to make you laugh and engage with the characters. Above all else, that's what I think this franchise should be judged on. Honestly, I think the major retcons that these spin-offs are framed around were good moves. Patrick's parents no longer look like background characters, although why they held back airing an episode with their original designs until months after their new looks debuted is baffling. Trading out Sponge on the Run's kid voice actors for the originals prevents SpongeBob's underyears from feeling too kiddie, and making Sandy bunkmates with SpongeBob and Patrick at camp creates a fun trio the original series rarely explored. The Camp Koral episode Kitchen Sponge even offers an explanation for why Sandy is here that tries to keep her debut episode where she originally met SpongeBob in the canon.
This is Big Chicks receiving you from the future. How are things going in the past?
To preserve the timeline, Sandy ordered her past self to attend summer camp to prevent the Krabby Patty secret formula from being discovered too early. They don't explain how present-day Sandy knew something was wrong in the past or how SpongeBob has now technically created the secret formula, but hey, it's time travel. Now that the show firmly takes place in an alternate timeline, you're free to have SpongeBob learn things and meet characters he first encountered as an adult. Plus, Patrick has a time closet in his show that regularly creates world-altering paradoxes. So that's a pretty easy way to wave away any inconsistencies. Now, time to start covering what I promised this video would be about.
Not right. Nope. Maybe? Maybe not.
Set 1 year after Sponge on the Run, Mr. Krabs has bought and rebranded Camp Koral, now spelled with 2 Ks. These are crucial pieces of setup that are only mentioned in this brief line,
I haven't seen you since last summer.
or on Twitter.
Why is Camp Koral spelled with C's in the new movie, Sponge on the Run, but with K's in the new series, Camp Koral? 3 words, Eugene H. Krabs. When Mr. Krabs took over the camp, he changed the C's to K's. I guess he's conceited. Spelled with a K, of course.
Development of this spin-off was apparently fast-tracked, described by Waller as laying track in front of a speeding locomotive. Story editor and voice of Plankton, Mr. Lawrence, called the end result SpongeBob 2, and he's not wrong. The lineup of main characters is identical, but they've been aged down, placed into a tight-knit environment, and given new dynamics. Squidward is a counselor who pulls rank over the core group of SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy. Plankton, aka Young Sheldon, has a supportive partner in Karen the Calculator, and works for Camp Master Krabs as the camp cook while conducting non-secret formula-related schemes. And previously rarely seen Bikini Bottomites like Kevin the Sea Cucumber, Nosferatu, and the sea lion who did the tanning equivalent of racial profiling are now recurring campers.
Must be this tan to enter.
And your skin is as light and smooth as, well, as a baby's body.
I'm sorry, but this is just a Family Guy gag. New additions include Rhea, Ro, and Regigild, the lackeys and butler of post-sequel snob Lady Upturn, an array of creepy outcasts that occupy the trawler cabin, and a pair of mischievous narwhal siblings. Narlene is a confident older sister type that drops by to pull pranks on the Camp Koral clientele. She cares about her brother Nobby, a gibberish-speaking underwater minion, but most of Narlene's jokes revolve around hillbillies or her big exposed feet. My dislike of the latter is self-explanatory.
She's making your precious food
With her feet!
As far back as Plankton's Army, someone on the SpongeBob team has loved writing in yokels and hicks. Sandy and Old Man Jenkins have always had a southern bent to them, but Narlene and Nobby have arrived as a conduit for kid-friendly bits about inbreeding and moonshine, sometimes bringing gross out to the forefront. They're here to add jokes that I've never been a big fan of, so I'm never standing up and applauding when they appear on my TV screen. At least we got a new kind of obscure undersea animal in the mix, and a female character who can be as goofy as the guys. Storytelling-wise, plots on this show lightly differentiate themselves by using the authority figures of Plankton, Puff, and Krabs as obstacles for the kids, tapping into camp-specific aspects like competitions and wild animals, or jumping from one group of characters to another, giving off an ensemble feel that Vanilla SpongeBob has been toying with for a few years. Ooh, Vanilla SpongeBob sounds pretty good right about now.
There was a point when we were working on the show where if any script, storyboard, or anything veered away from just focusing on SpongeBob, we would get notes for where's SpongeBob, but where's SpongeBob? We haven't seen SpongeBob in at least 3.5 seconds. I think, at some point the research showed that people like a lot of the characters, and they're really happy to follow any of the other characters through their day to see what they're doing.
So we started experimenting with that over the last 5 years, doing more episodes that were focusing on the side characters, and it opened up so much new material for us, and new kinds of stories that we could tell. So yeah, we're going to keep doing a lot more of that.
If you took away the camp coated paint, many of these conflicts could function just fine in the original series, and in some cases they did. Plankton is the only exception. All of his experiments being secret is an interesting wrinkle, and we get something like Game Night where he and Krabs just hang out, this time without the homosexual undertones.
You still there?
Yeah. I'm still here.
Good.
Doesn't quite stick the landing, but it's a standout from the early episodes.
Ouch! How about a little help here? Okay, we're ready!
With plots about stench wars and playing pirates, I'm reminded of their equivalents from the show's early years because they were more story-focused. SpongeBob has a cute overarching goal of trying to catch his first jellyfish, which fortunately is the only major character trait that feels origin story-y, besides a few one-off jokes.
Hey, that's my college fund!
From this, we get The Jelly Life, a slight retread of Nature Pants where SpongeBob tries to live among the wildlife. Patrick trying to capture SpongeBob is still funny, but it was more meaningful when the sea star was mad about his buddy leaving him, giving the joke some emotional weight, instead of Patrick not being able to recognize his pal.
Do your worst, talking jelly!
The summer camp framework is already kind of a contrived way to shove everyone together, but an understandable refusal to write the cast to be more childish, besides Pearl being an actual baby, means that a lot of the comedy and interactions feel the same, especially when your two main characters already had a childlike demeanor.
Remember to block with my face. Good job!
In essence, SpongeBob's Underyears is a different flavor of SpongeBob. And since all the new additions don't add much in the realm of humor, that puts pressure on the presentation to define this spin-off's identity. I guess we can start where every episode does. The theme song is alright. It efficiently introduces the cast and their dynamics, and having SpongeBob sing separates it from one of the most iconic intros ever. Getting a mention of streaming in there is pretty clever too.
Well, milk is streaming right out of your nose.
One of my biggest laughs came from when they parodied this with urchins, just like the original series does from time to time, even though they're acting like these are supposed to be equally recognizable. Bro thinks he's him indeed. The background music shoots for a casual ukulele and accordion-driven Hawaiian sound, adding a lot of nice new tracks exclusive to this series, but not enough to make it fully distinct from its older sibling.
I was playing on the jungle gym, and my leg came off again.
Oh my goodness!
I know this and the Patrick Star Show have different music editors than the original series, so maybe that's why there's occasionally some abrupt cuts.
Howdy! Here we go again.
Speaking of abrupt cuts, I don't like how the title cards were replaced with logos and on-screen credits and... Okay, to word this as nicely as possible, why does this cartoon look like that? This is obviously the TV budget version of Sponge on the Run, albeit with more creatively designed landmarks. And when it comes to the expressions, it's a solid approximation of the 2D art. I recommend watching director Pablo Smith's reel of expression notes that he posted. Made me appreciate how much they pushed the models to capture loose drawings.
No catapulting canoes.
There's some fun mixed media bits with live action actors or puppets, but they're few and far between. With all that being said, so many backgrounds look unfinished. Like Jelly Meadows is sometimes devoid of the many flowers and rocks you'd find in jellyfish fields. Having simple textures on the characters and blurring the backgrounds not in focus makes them lack detail. The shadows in outdoor scenes set in broad daylight can be weirdly dark as well. I'll give them props for having an ambitious transition to CG, but if it's barely going to take advantage of the 3D space in terms of how it's directed, I can't help but wish this was done in the traditional SpongeBob style instead.
Machi.
Fortunately, the second half of Season 1 sees a bit of an upswing for Kamp Koral. The conflicts feel more kid-centric, the Russian nurse Helga was transplanted from a one-off Season 11 episode to add a stern presence to the camp staff, the colors are more vibrant, and the lighting is much less harsh. There's even more beams of light to indicate that we're underwater too. Previously, you had stretched out scenes and unsatisfying anti-climaxes that are smoothed out with more natural escalations, and a few episodes that I really liked. Scaredy Squirrel takes advantage of Sandy still being a kid, and having her sensible brain struggle to process the gothic logic of the trawler cabin.
Obviously, you'd never eat us in a million years.
No, maybe not in a million years.
Lake Crashers has the kids host a secret demolition derby under the lake. A fun concept elevated by bringing in Mrs. Puff via Speed Racer parody to reference an infamous Season 8 episode. The way the camera whips around the set and pans over from one car to another is sick. Hats Off to Space also has some rocket ship chase scenes that look great in the extra dimension. And Jack McBrayer plays a space hillbilly, so I'll just live in denial that it's a Wander Over Yonder reference.
Well, howdy dandy, SpongeBob and Sandy.
Season 2 keeps the small advances made by its predecessor, but really, it's only superior because I only have to watch 13 episodes instead of 26. There's a little more 2D artwork and animation used for illustrations and backgrounds. The in-universe comics have this really appealing cartoony style, and I like seeing it mixed with the models. I kinda wonder what it would be like if this combo, or mixed media in general, was more prominent in the series. While they existed during Season 1, many episodes fall into two literal camps. Fantasy-based episodes, where half the runtime is taken up by action sequences, and old SpongeBob episodes. At camp, Sandy and sea creatures explore the island from the theme song. At camp, two characters compete in a wacky golf game. At camp, a rich character adjusts to a lower-class lifestyle at... well, that one was already at camp. That's not even counting the time the kids actually watch part of an old SpongeBob episode at camp. The focus on gags over character makes these rehashes pretty frustrating. Like, I can't get mad at Squidward being unfairly treated because I haven't been given a reason to care about him. But many of these have a weird wrinkle at some point that makes them kind of fun. To pop a bubble is just Bubble Buddy until SpongeBob's bubble friend is popped and it becomes a whodunit. A whodunit where the solution comes out of nowhere, but it's still a creative place to take things.
You can pop me if you like.
Don't mind if I do.
If I had to split the rest of the season into tiers, at the bottom you have the side character spotlights that always bring SpongeBob in halfway through to prevent these nobodies from having a mid-off. Then you got the character-specific conflicts about Sandy getting a new suit or Krabs getting obsessed with clowning that work but didn't need to be at summer camp. And at the top are strange plot lines that engage me because I have no idea where they're going. Patrick's body parts regrow separately after he's injured in 5 times the fun. Such a creative way to do a cloning story, and the way this rapid chomping was animated is so funny. Cretins of the Night is one of many horror-themed romps where Kid Fratu turns SpongeBob and Patrick into vampires. The standout bit is where they spray each other with actual blood and it gets all over the room, but I suppose it's okay since it's sprayed out of juice boxes. This is like reverse censorship? I've never seen so much gore in a kid's cartoon and never felt a thing. This spin-off was framed as a limited series when it was announced, and I don't think that's still the case, but nevertheless, we got a proper finale in End of Summer Days. All the campers and counselors say goodbye at moments that make me nostalgic for leaving a campsite or dorm room. SpongeBob and Patrick stay behind to stop some post-sequel era bandits from looting the camp, as SpongeBob tries one last time to catch his first jellyfish. It's honestly a nice spiritual transition into the main series, as the kids have to stop a real threat while playing pretend, and the Square Dude gets a big win that's captured in these great sweeping shots of Jelly Meadows.
I love jellyfishing!
Things very much end on a high note that made me realize I got a little attached to these versions of the characters. But that's partially because it's so surreal to see a piece of the SpongeBob franchise conclude.
Future Sandy says I should take the express train back home. For the good of the timeline. See ya for tea at the Tree Dome!
Explain how Sandy is in the Patrick Star Show then.
My immersion is ruined!
Despite its improvements, Camp Koral never stopped being SpongeBob 2. The differences are superficial, and its own ideas aren't given a lot of attention or aren't always substantial enough to support their own stories. I always found things to enjoy, but besides a handful of highlights, I can't fully recommend it on its own unless you're a SpongeBob completionist.
Well, Patrick, that was one wild summer at Camp Koral, huh? I can't wait to have even more adventures next year.
It doesn't help that beyond the first 6 episodes, Paramount Plus barely advertised this, despite being connected to their most popular IP.
Why is everything awful in this camp?
The sporadic scheduling and premiering 13 episodes across 2 years, then dropping the last 13 in one day didn't help either. With the other Nicktoons exclusive to the platform being recently removed, this, Transformers Earthspark, and Knuckles are its only originals aimed at kids left. I'm sure 6 to 11-year-olds will be all over this. If it was on a bigger streamer, the parents are more likely to subscribe to keep their children entertained.
Camp Koral, SpongeBob's Underyears.
Do you need to use the outhouse?
No.
Hey, what's up with that subtitle anyway? I get it. Under years, wonder years, underwater years. But what exactly are SpongeBob's years under anyway? Let's just end this segment. I've run out of valid criticisms to make. At the very least, the episode about Sandy building a robot to win an art contest will hopefully age well.
Oh, please. Yes, technically it's a painting, but it has no soul.
Attempting to tap into a precise and absurd sense of comedy inspired by Mel Brooks and Monty Python that could capture the creative team's primal comedic urges, Patrick's spin-off is presented from his own perspective, and everything right is wrong. Again, a slightly younger version of the Sea Star lives with his dad, mom, sister, and grandpa in a coffee pot with a nonsensical layout and interior design straight out of Pee-wee's Playhouse or a Mad magazine, uniquely colored with an imperfect watercolor style.
Ooh. I think the milk went bad.
In his TV set-shaped bedroom, Patrick hosts his very own program, simply titled The Patrick Show, putting on skits and interviews exclusively for the viewers on his front lawn. But it's also simultaneously real. The logic is fluid.
Every day, it's beamed out to millions of people all over the world. Or maybe it's just the people up front, I don't know.
Originally set up to be Pearl's nerdy friend in the original series, little sister Squidina is determined to turn all of her big brother's adventures into television. Whether it be trying out odd jobs with SpongeBob, watching their dad feud with newsboy Squidward over not paying for his delivery, exploring the house of their cranky neighbor Granny Tentacles to track down a mysterious scent, or listening to their ancient grandfather tell stories of his past, and apparently future.
I remember it like it was tomorrow.
Patrick's new family members bring in some of the funniest voice talent in animation, with Cree Summer as the dedicated, manic, and vaguely Canadian-sounding matriarch Bunny.
Since you're here, why don't you do that thing with your tattoo?
Oh, all right.
Tom F. Olsen is the fun-loving and ultimate dad, Cecil, continuing to play Pat's father even after being redesigned.
I can build something comfy out of these fun blocks for kids. Speaking of kids, I wonder what my kids, Patrick and Squidina, are up to.
Dana Snyder is the geezer Grandpat, and what a surprise that the main character he voices is also the best character.
Can I make you proud just once, Dad?
Son, I'm never proud of you, but at least I'm consistent.
In the first half of Season 1, Patrick interrupts his show to feature cutaways to commercials or TV parodies, featuring the likes of Mr. Krabs, Perch Perkins, and Fred that are somehow filmed live, often inspiring their viewers in universe. I compared them to the shorts found in Uncle Grandpa episodes, only if those were dropped in the middle of the story.
Call the number to book your trip today. It'll be amazing.
Other art styles are highlighted through segments starring alternate versions of the star. Set in a stop-motion gothic castle, a UPA-inspired spaceship, a grimy Conan the Barbarian-esque fantasy, and a prehistoric world. These detours feel like you're changing the channel, and it's another way that the series celebrates television. The title sequence is a classic spoken word intro, there's episodes centered around telethons, award shows, and season premieres, gags poke fun at censorship notes like characters needing to wear seatbelts, and there's numerous parodies of iconic TV hosts. I will always go to bat for SpongeBob including pop culture references that don't feel dated because they're too old for the target demographic to understand. Except for the Kamp Koral Rodney Dangerfield Kraken. I don't care if it's a double standard. I do not like that fella.
I'll tell you, I got no respect.
I had to look up this reference to Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of, and it made what Patrick called his version a lot funnier.
Looking around for...
The score includes a lot of relaxed Latin and lounge music that makes me think of old school game and talk shows, giving the soundtrack its own identity. Notable selections include Gay, Gay Activity, and Gay Time. They're mixed in with a ton of stuff from Jean-Jacques Perry, whose work on the Moog synth was all over another Nicktoon, The Mighty Bee. Honestly, his work may have more of a presence in Patrick's show, whether it be scoring a sci-fi element like the tiny futuristic city of Shamandor and human kidnapping aliens, or the Star Family's typical shenanigans.
Stay tuned for...
Patrick?
By showcasing a distinct cast and a variety of looks and feels, I'm less likely to compare the Patrick Star Show to SpongeBob SquarePants.
Hey, this is a nice fixer-upper.
Aspects like the superposed out, Looney Tunes inspired animation kind of fit better here due to the heightened reality and because it isn't being applied to a property that's had a more subdued look for over a decade. However, minutes into the premiere, I found myself asking, why should I care about Patrick as a protagonist?
I don't know how you do it.
Oh, I don't know what I do it.
He cares about his friends, family, and host duties, but he's driven by impulse, and often walks into conflicts by accident, like in one episode where he grows into a giant after basically absorbing knuckle-based nuclear radiation in the 1940s. It low-key debunks the theory that Bikini Bottom is the result of said testing, since it's already shown to exist.
Warning, warning. If you have entered the nuclear testing area, you are a knucklehead.
Hi.
Early on, I feel like the heart of the series can be found in the bond between Patrick and Squidina, as the Patrick Show comes across as a game they play together that the girl takes a little too far. As the director, she's the only one keeping her brother, and sometimes the rest of her family, on track, being the closest thing to a straight man, but one who facilitates the chaos instead of questioning it. The show must always go on.
I wasn't trying to kill them, but it makes great television.
I enjoy seeing the star-sibling relationship unfold, but it's tucked away in the background. Squidina isn't quite the secret protagonist I wish she was. There isn't much of a through line in most episodes to latch onto. Some of the standouts like Gas Station Vacation just contain a mountain of gags based around this one location, or push the animation by combining 2D, stop motion, and photo montages in the second half of Terror at 20,000 Leagues, where Patrick travels through his TV in search of candy. I feel like both the characters and comedy are more charming than laugh out loud funny. The energetic animation and skits are supporting stories that can't quite last 11 minutes, but I still had a good time. This works as a vibe cartoon.
Oh, that's our show. I hope you learned a lot about enemies, or ice cream, or toaster repair.
Season 1's mid-season finale reads like it was produced as a potential last episode, as it throws in every recurring character and cutaway segment seen so far in a sketch comedy format.
The Patrick Show has really gone downhill since the first 3 episodes.
It's loose, reference-heavy, occasionally incomprehensible, and the kind of nonsense some fans feared the show would be. But I don't know, I kinda love that this got to air. Throughout the next 4 episodes, we slightly shift away from Patrick and his show to follow the Tentacles and Star Family pets as the storytelling becomes more solidified. There's extremely silly but clear conflicts that raise the stakes, like Patrick's drool flooding the neighborhood or the house going Baba Yaga and rampaging around town. You can still have random elements like a gorgeous cutaway to the ham-based kingdom of Hamdonia because I care about what it surrounds.
Where will we live?
Where will we sleep?
Where will we watch TV?
When Squidina leads the house back to its rightful place, it's implied that the series doesn't take place in Bikini Bottom, but rather Ukulele Bottom. It's where SpongeBob and Patrick went to their jellyfishing convention in I Was a Teenage Gary. This was included by storyboard supervisor Ian Vasquez, who imagined that the town was part of the same county as Bikini Bottom, akin to Burbank being within LA County. It's a cool detail, but not followed up on elsewhere. Just wanted to mention it because this is a fascinating case of an official headcanon.
House!
Nothing against the first 13, but House Hunting and Fitzpatrick have so much energy and momentum in their plotting that they mark the first time where everything worked for me. They're a solid entry point if you're looking for a place to start. I could tell good things were on the horizon when they made a whole episode about this guy.
Fitzpatrick? My long-lost evil twin cousin?
He is Irish and therefore evil.
Oh, you know, I thought I'd assume your identity, ruin your life. Standard evil twin stuff.
Yeah, that sounds great!
Starting with its 18th episode, the Patrick Star Show saw a big shakeup, becoming the Chatrick Star Show. Longtime layout supervisor Kenny Pittenger came aboard as showrunner, and a new staff of writers, directors, and storyboard artists were assembled, creating a new team devoted to just making this spin-off. For the first time since season 9, a SpongeBob project was board-driven, meaning that the writers just write premises instead of full scripts, and the storyboarders develop the dialogue and visuals simultaneously. The series already felt very artist-friendly, in the way that so much creativity would be put into small moments like whenever the stars enter a scene. This practice is rarely done in TV animation nowadays thanks to shrinking deadlines and job creep, but there's a lot of enthusiasm online from the current crew about their work, and I can feel that in the back half of the season.
I hate to say this, but do you think there could be such a thing as too much fun?
Comedically, the jokes begin to speak for themselves, often holding on frames or going off model. The storytelling settles into a nice groove of using callbacks to earlier in the story or to a subplot during the resolution. Yuck. Paints Squidina as an underdog who struggles with being a regular kid. It's hard for her to learn sewing, vacuuming, and cooking, to the point of poisoning her teacher with a pickle pie. Her special talent is video editing, so I get it. However, after Squidina improves her home ec skills alongside friends and family to pass the class, she uses them to resuscitate her teacher.
I may need to pass, but my teacher doesn't.
This isn't a groundbreaking narrative structure. The pacing has only gotten faster and tons of jokes are still shoved in, but they're surrounded by strong beginnings and endings. The stories feel more comprehensive and reward you for paying attention to plot points wrapped up in wacky bits. The lack of cutaways means that new art styles are either squeezed in, or they get their own episodes.
All right, gang, let's Fleischerize them.
I think the series is at its weakest when the majority of jokes are leaning on the gimmick of seeing the characters as cavemen and robots, but those are few and far between. It's far more common to see Patrick dive into his family dynamics by exploring his dad's secret stash of mustaches and feuding with Grandpat after he becomes his grandson's stunt double.
That's Patrick Star right there. I know him.
Patrick.
I've seen him before. That's the guy.
These three are among the season's best, but my favorite has to be Bubble Bass Reviews, the most meta entry yet. Using Bubble Bass's critique of The Patrick Show as a way to point out animation errors and logical inconsistencies is fun, but I love that it's dedicated to keeping the technology of the SpongeBob universe locked to the early 2000s. So the editing and graphics look like an old YouTube rant video, swapping between screen recordings and video feeds. Bubble Bass even dresses like the early internet reviewer I had to explain to my normal friends when he cameoed on Smiling Friends.
I hope someone gets fired for this.
Intentionally or not, this also captures the online criticism of SpongeBob in the early 2010s. During the era where people ranted about how
the security system takes control of Squidward's house and begins attacking the city.
But before they heard the epic hip-hop SpongeBob theme song remix and went, no, you don't get to. You don't get to do that. I appreciate that the message here isn't to ignore the trolls, but instead a reminder that there are people behind the media you criticize. People who can criticize you the same way you criticize them.
Normally, when you stain your clothes, you feel embarrassed. But that's what we love about Bubble Bass. No shame.
The Patrick Star Show really found its footing, but big changes were on the horizon. Nah, it's pretty much the same. There's an effort to get the whole Star family more involved by having them play around in a single setting, like this cool-looking alien spaceship, planning a proper wedding for the cute and caring couple of Bunny and Cecil, or banding together to fund Season 2 of The Patrick Show.
Grandpa, you just figured out how to fund Season 2!
Stealing from children?
Season 2 is more character-driven, more outlandish, and more better. Saturn devouring his son is recreated with bubble baths, the family's pet toilet asexually reproduces, and another favorite starts by mocking Bill Nye and ends with Patrick becoming Dr. Manhattan.
That will be enough, Grandpat.
Really smart to use Sandy to teach Patrick, and kids at home, the difference between science and pseudoscience. They even redid the old Astrology with Squidward horoscope. I love tiny deep-cut nods like that.
Have you ever wondered how a radio works?
No!
Taking after Camp Coral, small pockets of Patrick's world get spotlight episodes like Schmandor, Hamdonia, and even the tattoos on Bunny's back. But these coexist alongside Patrick and the stars instead of being in their own separate worlds, so they feel like world building instead of detours. Chum Bucket List is the opposite of world building. Every other scene has a gag that shatters the fourth wall, but they're almost a necessity. The premise of Patrick trying to complete a bucket list after thinking he only has one day left to live is not original, and repeats another classic SpongeBob plot. Despite that, this is easily the funniest thing to come from any of these spin-offs.
Ready! Wait.
Meta jokes are more common in Season 2, but they fit a TV show about making a TV show, and never feel stale. Give me more in-universe references to off-model drawings, background layering, and playful jabs at Steven Universe.
Welcome to the new Patrick Show. Today we're going to talk about friendship and feelings.
We must have moved to a different network for Season 5.
Just give me more of the Bottom Buddies, a real name for a UK Nicktoons programming block. I know nothing is getting picked up right now, but ratings are apparently still strong, and I haven't had this much fun with anything SpongeBob related in ages.
Now this is cinema.
The original series still has terrific episodes occasionally, but it's nice to get away from the hit-or-miss nostalgic throwbacks and random character combos it's been depending on recently. The Patrick Star Show's 13-episode second season wrapped up as I put this video together, with a third already having begun, and I didn't have to worry about how the last episodes would affect how I felt about it. It kept firing on all cylinders, being reliably great but never predictable. By tapping into the madness while finding a method to send madness, Patrick and his family have proven on their own that they can be stars, and I think they deserve the spotlight.
Today's show went in all sorts of different directions, but I hope you all enjoyed it.
As I alluded to before, what's connected to the SpongeBob universe are cameos or major appearances from characters introduced in Camp Coral or The Patrick Star Show. Cecil visits the campsite, SpongeBob and Patrick watch Grandpat in a parody of The Little Rascals, and Arlene is a full-on recurring character in the main series now, complete with a slick 2D design but retaining the same personality.
That's your answer for everything, Narlene!
My favorite example is in PL 1413, the first episode to premiere after SpongeBob's Under Years ended. Plankton is trapped in a time capsule for 2,000 years and meets young CG Sandy in a distant future covered in chrome. She's been traveling through time since the summer ended, and continues to protect the secret formula from being discovered. It's a cute way to close the loop on that reveal from Kitchen Sponge.
Hold still while I activate my memory erasing device.
Your what?
In January 2023, Nickelodeon premiered SpongeBob's first ever crossover involving the series itself. Now, the title zone started out as a plot device in Season 11, explaining away characters that might otherwise seem too conceptually weird for the show. It's like these stories take place in slightly alternate realities, like the Twilight Zone, and that's what this event explores. It's all hosted by the French narrator. Yes, this is what that disembodied voice looks like now. Do you feel old yet? Shrinking Stars from the Patrick Star Show has the Star family evade Grandpat after they're accidentally shrunken by Captain Quasar from the UPA-inspired Patron segments. Next, welcome to Binary Bottom from SpongeBob SquarePants depicts an underwater world where every animal is a robot and vice versa.
Plankbot, you forgot to wind yourself again.
Thanks, Karen, my flesh and blood wife.
Following that, the Switch Glitch from Camp Coral has Karen and Patrick swap bodies. And it wraps up with You're Going to Pay Phone from SpongeBob SquarePants, in which Mr. Krabs is hypnotized by a demonic payphone he sets up in the Krusty Krab. All 4 segments are designed to be aired on their own, or alongside unrelated episodes of each series instead of telling one continuous story, kind of like the 2 miniseries that dropped in 2011. What connects them is a runner where Grandpat is flung across space and time via Patrick's time closet, making cameos in every show that culminates in a skin wrinkle in time. This short quickly wraps up the event. Again, they've done theme song variations before, but I like how this one pokes fun at the extended universe they're trying to build.
Sweet Neptune, have I found the beginning of the universe?
With every episode still needing to be self-contained and so much overlap in the cast across the 3 projects, this is a unique approach, but it ended up being SpongeBob's equivalent to Cartoon Network's Invaded. Cool connective tissue, but I want the characters in a crossover to actually cross over in a substantial way.
Where in space and time am I? Looks like I took a wrong turn at the last apocalypse.
Half of these premises aren't out of left field for their tones, like they've done multiple shrinking plots before, including just 5 episodes prior on the Patrick Star Show. I recall the monster-themed Legends of Bikini Bottom having the same flaw. It's like how Trios of Horror on The Simpsons started to feel tamer as the franchise got weirder.
It's amazing no one was hurt. Bye, everybody.
I'm surprised that it took until last year for this franchise to do something substantial with body swapping. Karen and Patrick's voice actors do these really out there impressions of each other, and it's a nice touch in what is otherwise an average Camp Koral caper. That's caper spelled with a C and not a K.
That's my body! We have to swap our minds back!
What are you talking about? I'm a rolly shoe! Rolly shoe forever!
I do love the wealth of fantastic designs and world building that Binary Bottom brings, despite being light on plot. It's the only standout portion of an otherwise mixed bag. You got this crazy cool Zardos-inspired sand droid, the Krusty Krab becoming a charging battery, and Squidward doing this thing I might get demonetized for describing literally.
I am going to have to live next to that.
I think the Tidal Zone would have been stronger if it leaned into making every segment a completely new universe, like Futurama's reincarnation, no matter how much of a strain it would have been on the design team. We were even robbed of a CG Grandpat model that would have only been on screen for a few seconds. Why wouldn't they render him in 3 glorious dimensions?
What is this? The Tidal Zone?
Announced in 2020 as the first of 2 spin-off films for Netflix, Saving Bikini Bottom puts Sandy Cheeks in the leading role as she and SpongeBob embark on a journey to Galveston, Texas to retrieve their hometown after it's plucked from the ocean to be used as the basis for a diabolical marketing scheme, getting assistance from her family of traveling circus squirrels along the way. While Sponge on the Run was launched as a streaming movie in most territories, it had a feature budget, albeit a lower one for theatrical animation at $60 million. This gives me TV movie vibes despite being released the same way. Not only do some of the assets from that production seem to be recycled, or at least approximated, with Sue Monk getting a special thanks credit, but the movie just kinda looks cheaper. The majority of the runtime is spent in live-action settings, and with the exception of Sandy and SpongeBob, the Bikini Bottomites aren't as expressive, boasting shiny textures reminiscent of video game cutscenes from 10 years ago.
Huh?
All things considered, the visuals are pretty nice. Plenty of props, environments, and characters strike a nice balance between being cartoony and realistic, especially the Rattlesnake Bandits and the Cheeks family van at sunset. There's some good squash and stretch too. Kudos to all the Canadian animation studios involved.
Hey everybody! It's raining Phase 1s! And they're free!
I only got a handful of small laughs from this flick, as some of the timing can be awkward. Although, a lot of the comedy comes from SpongeBob. I'm happy that Sandy being an adrenaline junkie and fighter alongside her science skills is still a part of her dynamic with the little guy, who has otherwise been slotted into the role of comedic relief / freak. He be smelling feces, another man explores his body, and he's officially a feet guy.
This place has more legs than Squidward!
The crux of the film is the relationship between Sandy's 2 homes of Bikini Bottom and Texas. I was mixed on the altered bikini outfit she wears above the ocean, but I like how Sandy has a new look to differentiate her 2 lives. Upon reuniting with her family, her parents are super supportive until her mom says this.
She can do whatever she wants in her life, as long as it's right here in Texas.
Hey, so this is never brought up again. When Sandy and SpongeBob need to suddenly leave the Cheeks clan to reach their destination, the very next line that the mother utters is this.
Ma? Pa? I just want to say...
You can tell us the next time you visit, dear.
So now she's cool with her daughter just choosing to visit? It's one of two realizations that happens off screen. We learn about the other via Ending Dance Party, a first for the SpongeBob movie franchise. Sandy has already accepted Bikini Bottom as her home in the opening, yet the turning point for her character is realizing that its citizens are also her family? It's hard to get invested in a character arc that's built on semantics, with Sandy learning something that she basically already declared in the opening, just worded differently. Everyone she knows gets along too, to the point of making SpongeBob and Squidward have moments of being very not straight around her relatives. This is pretty in character at this point.
He's so masculine.
Thank you.
I think it was a bold move to provide a canon explanation for why Sandy lives and conducts experiments underwater. You could argue the twist that causes the third act betrayal makes her come off as being oblivious, but it doesn't last too long, and I think the story makes it clear that the inciting incident was a new development Sandy wasn't privy to. As for the villains themselves, Wanda Sykes' hammy performance as the crazed scientist Tsunami carries the live-action scenes. I didn't find her henchmen Kyle and Phoebe that funny, but she's better having people around to yell at, no matter how different the audio quality is between her and the animated characters.
Tsunami, you're an embarrassment to scientists everywhere.
It's Nami.
Really? I've always said Nammy.
I'm sure their scheme will be compared to Nickelodeon over-merchandising SpongeBob, but there really isn't any commentary besides the message of, don't kidnap and experiment on sea creatures. Oh, I had this ready to go and everything. Tsunami is responsible for what I think will be the film's most memorable and divisive moments. For the first hour, the stakes are never too high. Sandy and SpongeBob don't face too many stumbling blocks in their journey, and nothing severe happens to the Bikini Bottomites until the A and B plots cross paths. There's a bit of super well-animated body horror that brings a sense of nightmare fuel for kids back to SpongeBob that only rarely appears in the Patrick Star Show nowadays. Whether or not it fits the franchise is another story, and its intensity is short-lived, but it adds to the movie's cool factor. Director Eliza Johnson came from ambitious TV comedies like What We Do in the Shadows, and this manages to feel like a big grand journey, even though most of the live-action sequences take place in a single room. It's more willing to do cartoonier things with the characters than Sponge Out of Water did in the real world, but it probably couldn't afford to be as experimental. The Sandy movie benefits from there not being a lot of other live-action CG projects that are willing to have cartoony action, blend different styles of animal designs for comedy, or superimpose a real-life head on an animated body. It's clearly going for a campy, lo-fi, mixed media aesthetic that's classic SpongeBob, kinda like that 20th anniversary birthday special, but it can come across as looking cheap next to the polished CG. It's the same kind of deal with the score. I prefer whenever there's a Hawaiian, or country, or surf rock flair to the background music, because the epic orchestral style we're settled with most of the time sounds a tad generic. I'll give the filmmakers their flowers for taking a risk visually, with the best gags pushing the suspension of disbelief just far enough. There are apparently plans to bring the Cheeks family into the main show later this year, but like Narlene before them, they feel like classic modern SpongeBob characters defined by one gag each. I'll take more of the Johnny Knoxville voiced Randy though. He's almost the grandpa of the bunch.
Randy! You're not in jail?
It's cool to have finally met Sandy's relatives, but I don't know, it was funnier when Texas was conveyed exclusively through edited images. It's not a huge loss, I like the goofy ambition on display despite the rough storytelling, but I don't think exploring her Texas side made Sandy Cheeks more interesting. It would have been cool if we got to see the world through her eyes like we did with Patrick. Have more Karate Island and less Texas. Since it puts so much emphasis on SpongeBob and the regular cast, to me this is like a SpongeBob movie starring Sandy instead of the Sandy Cheeks movie. Between the four films, it's my least favorite, but that's only because it didn't have the money behind it that Sponge on the Run did. Pretty ironic that this city rescue mission plot was originally pitched by Mark Ceccarelli for the third feature. Credit where it's due, I'd say this spin-off had the more enticing premise by far, and benefits from being a standalone product. Plus, the franchise has always struggled with long-form storytelling and driving up the stakes while maintaining the nautical nonsense. It's disappointing that saving Bikini Bottom didn't really work for me, but it's experimental enough to feel like the crew can figure out what did and didn't work, and make next year's Plankton movie even better. Maybe that's false hope, but this feels like the perfect franchise to be optimistic about.
And all my streaming videos on demand. I can't demand them anymore.
Yep, still optimistic. In April 2021, I wrote a paper on the franchisation of SpongeBob SquarePants for a class assignment, and analyzed what its experimentation with spin-offs meant for the brand. It's a product of its time, complete with taking decade-old Hillenburg quotes as fact and speculating on what a Patrick-centric cartoon would be like. but I'm glad I wrote it. Looking back, this op-ed was a place for me to vent my frustrations with a universe that I felt didn't need to exist, so I could try to critique these projects without other baggage getting in the way. I completely understand if any fans are still hesitant to give these a chance, especially when they're locked behind cable, or a streaming service with a poor interface. It's crazy that within a few months, SpongeBob went from being defined by one show with 2 optional movies, to almost needing a watch order so you're not confused when certain characters appear. At the end of the day, these spin-offs still feel like SpongeBob, sometimes too much like SpongeBob. But they're true to what the original series has been for the past few years instead of coming across as an imitation.
Crappy.
The original goal of this experiment was to explore the origins and backstories of these characters and place them in new environments. Yes, it's neat to have met everyone's family or see Bikini Bottom from someone else's perspective, but that hasn't affected how I perceive these sea creatures. I wouldn't exactly say this is a mini Marvel universe. The MCU doesn't have to include the character that started its franchise in every story that it tells. I could be wrong. Maybe they were ahead of the curve. Obviously, it's hard to make the Frasier of SpongeBob when there's little continuity and 2 decades of stories thoroughly setting expectations for how they should act. But I think the spin-offs prove that the supporting cast can lead their own adventures. For that reason, I can't confidently call the SpongeBob universe a failure. Some of the output's been a little boring or mediocre, reminding me of the overly hyped miniseries and TV movies that I grew up with, but I'm happy that the new shows have lasted long enough to experiment or try to figure themselves out. A testament to the value of bringing in new talent and letting them cook. Yes, these only exist to make money and sell merchandise, but also what merchandise? Camp Koral only got a few books and plushes, the DVD volume sets are appreciated but only appeal to a small market, and I don't know anyone who's buying the official Patrick Star Show sweatpants. Come on, Nickelodeon, they're giving you tons of fantastic merch ideas that you're just sitting on.
Oopsie doodle, just prices!
Based on how much I'd be willing to rewatch them, my ranking from worst to best is The Tidal Zone, Camp Koral, SpongeBob's Underyears, Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie, and The Patrick Star Show. The Summer Camp spinoff has more bright spots than the crossover, but it takes fewer chances across 39 half hours than the Netflix film did in 75 minutes.
What? I washed my hands.
I think I'll always be a SpongeBob fan. I'll always want to check in, and I'll always want it to succeed. I can't say I'm too excited at the prospect of spin-offs featuring characters like Squidward, Mr. Krabs, and Zeus the Guitar Lord.
Hey, I'm Zeus the Guitar Lord. I don't have a guitar yet, but if I did, I would run a really killer one. Like this!
Although, if they can tap into a new viewpoint or contribute world building that goes beyond adding new sources of comedy, maybe I'll find another one of my favorite animated series or projects in recent memory. We didn't need these spin-offs, but I'm kinda glad we got them.
I love a happy ending.